And welcome to the Moriah Nightly News on a Friday evening, literally bottled up by tech issues over a Kathy Hochul clip that is worth watching, especially for us upstate New Yorkers. But in any case, from the nation, Moriah, tonight's top stories. The conflict in Iran continues to heat up this week as the week draws to a close, with military planners putting more options on the table for the president. They are, for all intents and purposes, amping up plans and giving more weightier options to the president as more hardware moves into the region. That would be described, or could only be described, as more firepower or heavier firepower coming in from places like England and Germany, serving as the launch pad in many cases for that hardware. Interesting to note that despite the rhetoric from the president as of late, those locations in Europe continue to serve as central spots or locations for military hardware or strategic standpoints for military assets. The Wall Street Journal also noted, along with that Israel and Jordan would look to play a major role as things continue to develop with this latest wave in the conflict. The weaponry that is coming into play here includes things like those B-1 bombers that would do some of the heavier lifting in terms of more bunker busting type circumstances or scenarios. F-16 and F-35 fighter jets also moving into the area, along with special operations forces and medics being moved into the region. Retired General Joseph Vattel, the former commander of the U.S. Central Command, that's the region of the military or section of the military that oversees the Middle East, noted that this is, again, to give or designed to give the president more flexibility and force of options, as he called it, and did not necessarily mean direct escalation at this point in time. This comes after growing concerns this week in Washington over the cost of the war, even among Republicans. Those like Republican Brian Fitzpatrick, a U.S. representative from Pennsylvania, said that he wanted to pay the troops but did not want to support the war. That was a direct quote coming from a Wall Street Journal article after he had voted in favor of funding a $95 billion spending package, $73 billion of which is going for defense and intelligence spending. That is also after testimony this week on Capitol Hill from Pete Hegseth, the defense secretary or secretary of war, over the costs of the war, estimating to be around $37 billion. At least that was by his own testimony. The plans are also underway or being considered by the U.S. military for Pickaxe Mountain. That was the location in Iran that we reported on earlier in the week. That is still under consideration at this time by the U.S. military or by its planners, and we have not confirmed that, or that has not been confirmed by us or other media outlets. And the questions at this time, or at this point in time, remain whether or not the U.S. has the capability or to more or less hit those locations with its current military hardware. More or less, would our current bombs in our arsenal be able to penetrate deeply enough with how deep those bunkers go? It apparently seems that Iran has literally hunkered down for the long haul as part of the strategy that I have alluded to several times over throughout this broadcast. Also significant in terms of foreign policy and Middle Eastern affairs especially, is that the U.S. is seeking out a new arrangement or agreement with Saudi Arabia, of all places, for a more or less peaceful nuclear program. The technical term for it given by the Wall Street Journal was a civilian nuclear program, which would be for peaceful purposes if it is done according to plan. This would be a 30-year deal or agreement worth billions of dollars for U.S. companies to go into Saudi Arabia and build a uranium enrichment facility, provided that a joint study were to find it warranted. That would also be, though contingent as of late, on them being the Saudis, joining the Abraham Accords and normalizing relations with Israel, per reporting later in the week by larger media outlets. Some had questioned the usefulness or warrants of the deal, given the Trump administration's current posture towards Iran, that is Iran, that's Tehran being the capital of Iran, and of course, with Saudi Arabia being the regional rival to Iran, there were many questions about this policy. Quite honestly, myself included, giving my own opinion there. Robert Einhart, however, a senior State Department official who advised both Democratic and Republican administrations in the White House on issues of nuclear proliferation, which is a fancy term for the sharing of nuclear information, said that it had the possibility to potentially revitalize the U.S. nuclear industry, noting some strengths of the deal, and not only the U.S. nuclear industry, but also strengthening U.S. Saudi relations and denying the possibility for Russia and China to gain a foothold in that region, and more specifically, gaining a foothold in playing any kind of role in Saudi Arabia's nuclear program. It would more or less deny Russia and China any sort of access, and denying Russia and China any sort of access to anything is a net positive for the U.S. and, quite honestly, the entire free world, as I have very much stated. Public enemies number 1 and 2 there, breathing down our necks there. Some Democrats were outright opposed to this agreement. This is usually to be expected there, although there were others, like Brad Storm of California. I hope I read my writing correctly there. That's what happens when you have a handwritten script. He noted that he was more specific on how he would vote, saying that Congress should only approve the agreement if the Saudis were to agree to nuclear enrichment, or if they were to agree to not doing any kind of nuclear enrichment, or if they would agree also to not reusing any material from a reactor to build a weapon. The agreement, however, is likely to go through regardless, because of the fact that Congress would likely not be able to muster any sort of a vote that would be relevant to stopping the deal. They would need 2/3 of a supermajority to override any veto from the president or pass the necessary resolutions to make any attempt. In any case, the Senate itself will move to ratify that treaty, as that is where the power to do so is delegated per our Constitution. The other benefit, however, would be that it would free up oil production for export from Saudi Arabia's oil. That might be a net positive, given the concerns over oil this week. As oil hit $100 a barrel this week, once again, for the first time since May, the prices had been falling downward slightly since the cooling of tensions and the potential ceasefire, with the cooling now off and the temperature going back upward again. So are the oil prices once again hitting $100 a barrel. That also pushed the price of fuel, your gasoline prices. The national average is now once again over $4 a gallon. That, of course, for us here in New York State would not matter a tosspot because we have not seen anything below $4 for months now, and we all know it, and I'm not a fool. On that note of New York news, that is where most of the techish problems came in, and I will spare that part for the end. However, to note, first of all, a very much piece of considerable economic news that I had not covered earlier in the week, but it is significant for us here in the North Country region to our south in Glens Falls, but it affects many of our workers up here. With the news coming out of Finch Paper, or Finch and Prine, as it used to be called, but it is now Finch Paper, no longer accepting local pulpwood in its Glens Falls mill. They have instead decided to move over entirely to imported material. That is not necessarily imported, though it could be, but to say that it is outsourced product from outside the region. The sources of that material have not yet fully been confirmed, though it is likely to come from Canada or the southern United States. That is again not confirmed, but speculated by those who work and operate inside the industry. Behan Communications Vice President John Brunt said that Finch is setting the company up for longevity in the Glens Falls area or region by ending these pulp purchases. But obviously, the big concern is the economic impact and job losses for really the smaller independent contractors, like my father and many others here in Moriah and Ticonderoga and others. The professional logging contractors of the Northeast, in a statement, said that this is a significant loss for the region's logging and trucking industry with far-reaching economic consequences, as well as a serious negative impact on the ability to properly manage forest health. That is, of course, a reference to the sustainable timber harvesting and the concerns that many of our forests will become overgrown with hemlock and other woods that will be left behind per the reporting on this issue. And now, with this taking place this week and the announcement that after 160 years, which is pretty substantial in itself, that going all the way back to the end of the Civil War, that this will leave the international paper subsidiary Sylvamo in Ticonderoga as the final pulpwood supplier here in New York State and in the Adirondacks more specifically. That, of course, is again a huge blow to the economy, and one that is rather personal to me as well, given my family connection. And with that, that leads me to the final piece of news for the evening and for the week that was significant enough to try and get a clip to show. And that was of our wonderful leader down in Albany, Kathy Hochul, speaking on AI data centers with a wonderful comment providing what she really thinks about upstate New York and those of us who live here. Assuming that this clip will work, this was on a clip from Fox News 5. It only takes about 10 seconds, but it will be a shaky 10 seconds, assuming that all goes well.
Negotiate with a major AI company and a major tech company and really get good community benefits, make sure that they're not taking too much water. And I said with this huge spike in the number of applications, and a lot of our little communities upstate, they don't have the sophistication to be able to negotiate with a major AI company and a major tech company and really
Okay, that was very rough. I apologize for the again the tech issues on the other side getting that out, but there you have it. We don't have the sophistication to deal with tech companies because we are just apparently too stupid to know how to deal with that. If there was any question or indication or doubts or confusion as to why I am so anti Kathy Hochul, I believe you have proof positive, or exhibit A, as they would say in court, as to my answer right there. Again, I do want to apologize for the problems with the stream, with the tech issues in getting that out, but well worth it for those of us paying attention. So with that, we will end this week, and reminding you that to, of course, have a good weekend. And this is the end of our final full week before the Essex County Fair, and heading up there next week. And the announcement for that will be forthcoming on our Facebook page. And do be sure to like, subscribe, and all of that good stuff on Facebook or YouTube. There is also this weekend, for those interested, of course, there is, it's been circulating, the protest in Ticonderoga is going on, to let folks know that that is going on. So that is the Moriah Nightly News for this evening and for this week. Have a good evening and good night.